Jay Bacrania, welcome to the EO360 podcast.
Hi, Dave.
Thanks for coming back, man.
I'm happy to be here. We had a good time last time.
We did. And for those that are listening to this and might not have heard the previous interviews, multiple or singular?
And we've just done one so far.
Just one. Okay. So if you didn't listen to that previous interview I did with Jay, Jay is a business coach. He's not just any business coach. So he's my business coach. And Jay and I have been working together for a very long time. In fact, Jay was a member of EO, and this is the EO podcast. So if you're not familiar with EO, well, you ought to be at this point, Entrepreneurs Organization. Jay was a member of EO. He was in my forum for a little while, and then he ultimately left to pursue this coaching career many years ago. And so, Jay, you spend every day, all day, talking to founders like me about the challenges we're facing. And I've become so grateful for the service you do. You're hands down the best coach I've ever met. I mean, which is why I asked you to join me again here. And you've become so valuable to me as a coach personally, and for my business, that I have now asked you to coach my entire leadership team. And so you have one-on-ones with the 4 other people on my leadership team. You help us go through our annual, we use the OKR methodology, objectives and key results. And so you guide us through that process. You've taught us how to do a lot of it on our own. And then, of course, like I said, you spend a lot of time coaching us one-on-one. But you're doing this every day, all day. And you hear not just the challenges that I'm facing and my team's facing, but I think you have other clients too, and you hear their challenges, and you're invested in this for a living. And so I thought it'd be really cool to create a new series for a subset of the EO360 podcast. I'm going to be calling creatively Coaching with Jay.
So creative, amazing.
Now, as soon as I said that, I thought maybe I should have consulted AI in that to get a better name.
No, well, hopefully the content will deliver.
So you agree that's a terrible name for the series, Coaching with Jay?
It works.
It does work. I think, and what I like about it is it says what it is pretty darn clearly. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do these series, and I think we're going to do it once or twice a quarter. I haven't quite figured out the pacing yet, and I'm not going to worry about that too much. Once or twice a quarter, I'm going to invite Jay back to talk about another topic. And some of the topics I think we could talk about, and I asked Jay about this in advance. I said, Jay, what other topics do you think we could talk about? And Jay responded, he said, and I'm putting some of these in my words, but connecting a personal vision to business vision. I know I've talked to you about that along with purpose. There's this whole concept of trying to get my arms around purpose, especially as an entrepreneur later in life. What drives you changes a little bit. So those are a couple good topics right there. Leveraging yourself with the right team, including an assistant or chief of staff. One of the greatest sessions that we had, Jay, and I was super skeptical. Can you imagine that? Me a little bit skeptical. I was super skeptical going into this because you're like, yeah, let's just carve out 4 hours so that we can talk about your role and your partner's role. This is my partner, Cameron. And you're like, let's just carve out 4 hours so we can work on that. And in my head, I'm thinking, are you kidding me?
Was it 4 hours?
What the hell are we going to do in 4 hours to talk about his role and my role? It went by so fast, but we used every minute of that 4 hours. And it was one of the most valuable sessions we ever had to really clearly define what does he do and what do I do? It was
and then
amazing.
And then after that, we saw the downstream effects of that, right? So many things were unlocked for the two of you and for the rest of the company. For the two of you personally, just in terms of your, enjoyment of the job, your actual output of what you do, and then also for the company. It was a pivotal moment, I think.
I think so too. And there's a lot of those. And which is why I wanted to bring you in here, because I think in this series, if it can spark a thought process for another founder out there, if it can get them thinking about something a little bit more, just working on something with a little bit of structure, that could be incredibly valuable. And
It,
so
it yeah, and just to jump in there, one of the things that I certainly experienced when I was building my business and getting incredible mentorship, um, was that sometimes you experience something, you can kind of describe it, but you just don't have the right names or shapes of what's going on in your mind. And so you can't do much with it. You just sort of see it and feel it. But in many cases, what coaching can do is just to help people sort of recognize patterns that they're experiencing, but maybe they can't see because they just haven't been through it a bunch of times. And just that naming and that pattern recognition, offering that to somebody sometimes can just be the thing that like clicks everything into place and makes it much easier for them to go and, get unstuck from wherever they're stuck.
it's interesting. Well, you bring up that topic, stuck and unstuck, because that is the topic of the day for today. Is we're talking about. I think there's a lot of times when entrepreneurs and founders just feel stuck, and so um, I thought that'd be a great topic to start with. I know you have a lot of insight on that, um, and the word stuck to me means a few different things. Um, I think the most for again, in the way when I hear that somebody's stuck, to me, what it means is they're spinning their wheels, they're doing a lot of stuff, and it's just not getting the results that they want or expect.
Hmm.
Um, to me, that's stuck. Now, that might be the result, might be the feeling it gives you. It might be more freedom. Oftentimes, it's more revenue. Like they expect growth, and there's
Yeah.
no growth happening. It's just
Yeah.
not happening, or maybe marginal growth.
Yeah.
So, but tell me when other founders come to you and talk about feeling stuck, what are they referencing? What are you hearing?
Well, I can even start with my own experience. I was stuck in my own business for many years trying to solve the problem of how to grow past a certain point. And I'll tell you, the feelings were you feel like you are just pushing as hard as you can against something that just doesn't move. Or, the roller coaster of, oh, I think I finally found the idea. Me and Sheila, my business partner, who's now our CEO for my company, we used to joke that we were constantly telling the story like we're just on the cusp, like it's just about to happen
On the launching pad.
on the launching pad, and so it's this sort of
I've said that so many times in my journey, my entrepreneurial
right,
journey. We're on the launching pad.
just this one more
Damn
thing.
it.
But I tell you, sometimes it's like, sometimes you have good days, but then some days you wake up and you're just sitting there and you're thinking to yourself like, man, what am I doing? Like, wow, I don't, you feel a sense of, self-confidence hit sometimes. Do I actually know what I'm doing? Do I belong doing this? You look around and you see all your EO buddies, like their businesses are thriving and like, why can't I do that? Um, and then you also feel some sense of obligation if you have a team. Um, hey, I have to move this forward for them, both for their good, but also to make sure that I keep people, right? Nobody wants to stick around in a company that feels stuck. And then other people that I work with, I think that's one version of being stuck. Another version of being stuck is your business might be performing well, growing a little bit every year, but you can feel like you just don't have control over it. That every year a different gasket blows and you end up, thinking the year's going to end great, and then all of a sudden you owe, you've lost money that year somehow at, at the 11th hour. That's another version of being stuck, of just the kind of chaos of a business, even if it's progressing. Um, yet another version of being stuck is you're in your business, and on the outside, everybody looks at the business and says, "Hey, it's good, it's growing, delivering good service. People seem happy." But inside, they're like, "I'm done with this. I got to get out. I'm having no fun. I don't find it meaningful anymore." This often happens with people who've run a business for, 10, 15, 20 years plus. So that can be another version of being stuck. It's almost, in a way, almost being trapped or feeling like you're trapped in your business.
Well, maybe a little sense of boredom, like going,
Absolutely.
doing the same things every day, no
Yep.
longer being stimulated or challenged by new ideas or new problems. I
Yep.
remember my first business I sold when I was 14 years into it. And w- I welcomed the sale, not because of the, well, yes, of course, because of the money. That was welcoming.
Yeah.
But I also, the timing was welcoming because I was starting to feel that monotony of the
Yeah.
business. It was a good time to move on and try something else.
Yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes, entrepreneurs get into entrepreneurship in many cases because they have that desire to push into the unknown. And then all of a sudden the unknown becomes known and it's not growing fast enough or it's not different enough, or a person has evolved and changed as a human being and what they cared about 10 years ago is not something that is as important to them now. All those things change, and ultimately you can feel stuck in many ways. And this is one of the interesting things we'll talk more about, but I think with any leader that I work with, there's always a set of external factors and there's always a set of internal factors. And sometimes the problems we're working on are external, and sometimes the problems we're working on are internal. And so you could be stuck externally. What I mean by that is, your business is not growing, you're not getting enough leads, you're not, solving the right problems, you don't have the right team around you, right? Those are external manifestations of potentially being stuck. Internal is all that stuff around how you feel about that. Two people could be in the exact same situation. One could feel completely trapped, and the other could feel like this is like, this is amazing. I get to do this every day. And so we're often working in both of those in parallel on both of those levels. And to your point earlier, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if they're newer to it, um, they don't often take stock of that internal landscape, even though it sort of drives everything. And very often that internal landscape is just as important, if not more important, than the external landscape. And the two are very, very closely connected.
Well, how would you take inventory? And you said the internal landscape. You're referring to what drives you. What are you referring to when you talk about the internal landscape? And then the second part of that is, so how would you take inventory of that, as you said?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe you should be a coach, Dave. Um,
No, thank you.
right?
This
One
is
person's joy, another person's
amen to that,
terror.
man. Yeah.
Um, the internal landscape, I would say, is all of these things are actually part and parcel, right? I was just talking to a client today about how all the things that you look around and see around you that you say you don't want, you had some significant part in bringing those to be, right? You created those in a way. So
Hmm.
that comes from that. There's the internal and the external are very closely connected. But when I just kind of in shorthand say internal landscape, I'm talking about the feelings, right? How do you feel every day? Do you feel upbeat? Do you feel happy? Do you feel excited? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel sad? Do you feel scared? Do you feel nothing? Right? The feelings. Also about your body. Like, what do you feel in your body? Do you feel light? Do you feel, you know, um, strong? Do you feel weak? Do you feel kind of really like, you know, heavy? Um, and then also a big part of the internal landscape is what are the talk tracks that are going on in your head? We all have the voice or the many voices or the whole orchestra or chorus of voices in our head that are always we're always saying things to ourselves. Like, what are those things that we're saying about ourselves, about other people around us? And there's so many different factors. There's no optimal ideal, and it's not like we're trying to just seek out good feelings all the time. But certainly, there is a better and a worse way to be with your internal state, and just tuning into that and having some connection to that, I think is sometimes a really important part of the entrepreneurial game. Not always. Sometimes, the mission is the mission and it doesn't matter how you feel and what needs to be done, just go do it. But more often than not, especially if you're trying to play the game for a while, you kind of have to keep both of those things in mind, the external and the internal.
I love the talk track. The way you position that what are the voices in your head saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
and and uh here is something I struggle with, and you know this probably because my guess is we've talked about this. And I have this conversation with my team all the time. One of our core values is love the journey.
Yes.
It's which is hard to do sometimes. And I I'm going to take the position that it's unlikely anyone is going to love the journey all the time. Like love every part of the journey. Even in recreational things, the best things in life are really, really hard, and hard things are not always enjoyable
Hmm.
throughout the entire thing. And so, like, physically, I do a lot of things where physically it hurts. It's really hard, beats me up, drains me, and I'll do it again tomorrow because I love it.
Hmm.
So it's confusing sometimes if you listen too closely to your mind and your body because you're doing something hard that's valuable versus doing something hard that's not so valuable.
Yes.
And that to me, it's just a very confusing. It's very, and that's why coaches like you are great because you help me sort through the challenge of like, I'm feeling beat up at the end of every day. I'm exhausted. You know what, Jay? The other day, I was drained all day. And I got through a bunch of things, which is hard to do when you're drained. It's unusual for me to actually accomplish a bunch of stuff when I'm feeling drained. And I got to the end of the day even more drained. And I was just so ready to shut. And it wasn't even that late. Like it was, I want to say it was like 5, like right on the nose. I made it. I was like Dolly Parton. I made it right to 5. I was working 9 to 5 that day and I was drained. And I remember shutting my computer and just being actually, I don't even shut my computer, but I remember like stepping up out of my office and be like, I'm done.
Yeah.
But before I left, I sent a Slack message to my team. I forget exactly what it was. It was something like, today was a kick ass day.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
reason it was a kick ass day, I'm going to relate this back to running.
Yeah.
Um, the runs on a sunny day where you feel good, those are nice, but they're not kick ass days. Kick ass days are when you don't feel good or it's raining or it's freezing and you get out there and you finish it.
Mm.
Like that's a kick ass day. And that's
Yeah.
what I felt like that day.
Yep.
And so it's tough to navigate how you feel and then bring it back and say, okay, well, that was really hard and I feel drained. Therefore, I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
Well, so much of this comes, talk tracks is sort of my way of saying the voices that are always there, kind of telling us, narrating what's going on for us. But this is something you and I have talked about a lot, which is the story is sort of the overarching thing that we tell ourselves, right? So the story is in the example of running, right? You go out running on that rainy day. There's a story you're telling yourself about why that's a great thing. It's a great thing for your health. It's a great because you feel that ability to have some sovereignty over yourself, some control over kind of your decisions. You feel strong because you're able to kind of push back against nature, right? There's a lot, all sorts of different possible
I
things.
like that pushback against nature. That's and nature being, I don't want to go out right now. Like that's
Yeah,
nature. Nature
yeah,
is saying,
yeah.
sit in the couch, get a blanket, turn on the fireplace because that looks warm and cozy and you don't need to run.
And there's a story that then leads you to a sense of feeling something on the other end. And a lot of times that's what we're doing with in coaching is thinking about and sometimes people are stuck. Going back to that theme, maybe you're stuck, but some of it is about the story you're telling yourself about being stuck, which maybe is correct. But one thing that we don't do very well is really try to listen to and understand and look at the stories we tell ourselves. They're so
Mm.
close to us they're sometimes hard to even see. Like it's almost like I don't know how to put it, but it's so part of you, you can't even differentiate from it enough to actually see the story or hear the story or or tell the story to yourself. And so in many ways, being stuck can be about the story you're telling about either yourself or your team. I'll give you an example. I have worked with leaders who feel extremely stuck because they feel like they have built a business, but they have to do everything in that business. And even though they have, some of these leaders have big companies with lots of people, but they end up feeling like nothing gets done right if I don't have my eye on it. And there's too many things to have my eye on. And how am I ever going to grow? And I feel stuck. Part of that story is implied is the people that I work with can't do their jobs effectively or they can't do their job well, right?
Or not as good as me.
Or not as good as me. And so you end up in this story that keeps playing out and you can't see it because you just keep pointing at the story. This keeps happening, right? It's confirmation for you. Versus if you can step back a little bit and start to realize you're telling this story about the people around you, can you find a way to tell a different story? Which might mean you might need a different team, but sometimes just telling a different story about the same people starts you behaving differently around them, which brings out a different behavior in them, right? So it's a way of sometimes getting unstuck is about just really understanding the story you're telling yourself, telling a different story. Not always. It's not always that clean, but
I love what you're talking about is perspective,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Another simple cliche way of putting it is just your attitude.
Yeah.
It's a mindset, which talk to me about other reasons why people are getting stuck that you've seen.
Yeah. So I think
And how to address them. So I love that one. So one is like I'm irreplaceable. Like I'm the best. I started this because I'm the best at this business. And I'm going to hire people to help me be the best. But ultimately, by the way, Jay, that's one really good thing about not being really good at anything is it's easy to start a business and then everyone you hire is better than you at it. Like
an
that's been
easy
my
challenge,
secret.
man. That's it.
That's
Yeah.
that has been my secret is seriously, and I mean this genuinely, if I mean it genuinely, I'm going to say most of the people I hire are significantly better at what I hire them to do than I would be
Yeah.
at doing what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Like genuinely, like the people on my team are way better at doing what they do than me.
Yeah. And if you're able to sort of, for some people that would be a very hard thing to do because it feels threatening to be surrounded by really amazing people. For other
Yeah,
people,
I don't know what that says, but I am
yeah,
not threatened by them. I'm
that's awesome.
grateful.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, sometimes, and you know this too, sometimes I just feel like I'm not doing a good enough job to
Yeah.
keep up with them. I
Yes.
feel like I'm letting them down.
Yeah. Yep.
It's quite the contrary. I don't feel threatened. I feel embarrassed sometimes because I got all these people around me that are just so damn good at their jobs.
Yeah. So well, let's take that as a jumping off point. You asked about different ways of getting stuck.
Yeah.
Um, there is definitely a pattern that happens when a leader grows a company, they start to delegate things to other people. They bring them in. They're really talented people. And typically what happens is the leader starts as, say, the kind of CEO, the general manager, also running sales, also running finance, right? If we're talking about a smaller company, company grows and you fill all those functional seats, and the leader still remains as either CEO or maybe as general manager, one or the other, COO or president, sometimes called integrator. One of the patterns that I've noticed is that there comes a point where that leader actually cannot do that job that's remaining anymore because they're just not put on this earth for that job. They might have been put on this earth to start a company, but that doesn't mean they're put on this earth to be the CEO of a $50 million company. but they kind of paint themselves into that corner.
Hmm.
And then they have a really hard time letting go of that because then there's this sense of, well, if I'm not doing that, then what am I doing? There's almost a guilt of then I don't do any. What do I do? And there's a sense of not knowing where your place is. And so because you don't know where your place should be, you don't let go. And because you don't let go, you're actually holding all the people back that report to you. So it's a very interesting pattern of getting stuck where a leader actually is good at elevating, good at delegating, but then hits a point where they need to actually just step out of the completely out of that kind of role or ecosystem that they're in. In that case, often they'll go into a more of a chair, like chairman, chairperson role, or they might go into, they might go back into the business and become an individual contributor in a particular area that they love, right? They started the business doing something. They no longer get to do that thing, but they still love that thing. So,
I've seen some more of an evangelist role,
yes,
like a
exactly.
figurehead almost,
Absolutely.
going out and
Yep.
speaking. And
Yep. And sometimes what I've found is that often leaders of those kinds of companies, they grow that company and the culture of that company is really intertwined with the culture of who they are as a person. And so while they don't have to do stuff as much, they still need to be there and hold the space and hold the kind of principles and the values, right? Often the values of the company are intertwined deeply with the values of the founder. And just the founder being in that space holds those values. And so that's one way of somebody getting stuck is not knowing when to actually step out, continue to step out of a role, even at the highest level in some cases.
have give me some examples of where that may be. I mean, the only one I can think of is like you've grown to a certain place. Like I've heard, of course, 1 million is significantly different than 10 million, which is
Yeah.
significant. There's different stages where
Yeah.
the type of business changes dramatically. I don't know if it's 1, 10, 20, 50. I don't remember what the numbers are, but that's the only scenario I can think of. Like, I don't know. I've never run a $50 million company. I honestly don't know what challenges I would be faced with running a $50 million company. I don't know if I would be a great $50 million company CEO or not. I'd like to try it. Be awfully fun. But that might be a scenario where, especially if private equity is involved, it might be the time for me to step aside. But have you seen scenarios? Like, what other scenarios is it a good time for the CEO to step aside or the founder to
Yeah.
find a new role?
So that's the big one is
The size.
yeah, as a company grows, everybody on that leadership team, maybe imagine an initial starting leadership team of a company that's doing 10 million in revenue. Once it gets to say 20, 30 million, the business starts to change. It changes along the whole way, but it's going to look very different, say at 30 million than at 10. Some portion of the people on that leadership team will adapt and grow and just grow right into that, assuming they haven't done it before. But many of the people on that leadership team will get to a point where it's like, oh, that at after a certain point, their unique skill set and their gifts and their talents are no longer what's important in that particular role, right? So the role continues to change and evolve and grow, but the person doesn't always change and evolve and grow with it. So this applies to the leadership team, but it also applies to the owner and the founder. And so that's very much one is like I like to think about it as like the company continues to grow, but people sort of find their niche at different levels of the company. And everybody in an ideal world has to be able to have an open conversation about that on that leadership team so that people don't feel kind of demoted or left behind. It's just it actually the truth is they're not going to be happy in that role either if they're not a good fit for it. And so that's one where the companies grow in size, and that's often where the founder has to sort of step back or the company stops growing. Either or, right? So that's one. Uh, the next one is when The next one that I've seen is when an owner just gets tired, or a founder gets tired, and this happens often. You mentioned earlier, it happened to me, happened to you. I've seen this in a couple of different companies where things might be going great, but they're just maybe they've hit a different life stage. Maybe they've either just had kids or their kids, grew up and left the house. Maybe they have a health scare. This happens from time to time where somebody will have, either a health scare for themselves or a health scare for somebody close to them. And all of a sudden they're like, wait a second. It kind of shifts their perspective on what they want to be doing with their time in their life. So they can get tired. And that's another place where I've seen a tired leader try to continue to run and grow a team because they feel like they owe it to their team. And you can do it to some degree, but that's really a great time to sort of be thinking about what to do next or how to shift things so you can focus on something that gives you a little bit more of that energy instead of feeling that tiredness.
I don't know if this is I may be going off track with this, but when you're describing that, I'm visualizing an end of life entrepreneur, somebody that's been an entrepreneur for a long time, aging, but not wanting to quit. Like a lot of us think we're never going to retire. So imagine a 70, 75-year-old. I mean, good grief. Look at our presidents for the past several presidencies. Like you would never want to be in a company led by an 80-year-old person. They're not going to be as aggressive and as assertive and as enthusiastic. I don't know. They're maybe not even just on top of things like AI to push the company forward. At what point are there times where you've seen a leader think they're good for the company and they just are not, and they
Oh
need
yeah.
to? So if that leader owns the company, like suppose it's me and my company, I'm not going anywhere. Like I love it here. I'm having a great time. I'm making money, and it's fills my ego. Like how do you? I guess that's not a problem for anyone else.
No, I mean, if it's a closely held
It's
company, it's a private company, you can do what you want, right? And
yeah.
it's not a problem. I think where you see the problem is if the person themselves is feeling like they want to shift. Um, or if you start to see performance problems where you get retention issues, you get people leaving, the company is like slowly going downhill, and they're not able to turn it around. So those are some of the like the symptoms maybe could be some of the symptoms of that. But to your point, yeah, it's really if a person wholly owns a company, then there's no real problem. I think to me, one of the sort of maybe more internal and nuanced things that I see is you'll sometimes see people hanging on to a role. You'll see maybe a drop in performance. You'll get a hint of maybe they're not actually happy. But what keeps happening is they keep telling themselves the story. No, I should do this. I have to do this. This is what I want to do, right? But they're telling themselves that. But actually, underneath all of that, that's not actually what they want. Or maybe it was and it's changed. But that's where things get really interesting from a coaching perspective is there's there are these patterns that we have around being in the world. Like we've talked about this, me and you, around the way that we show up for other people. Both of us are on the Enneagram have a similar typology, right? And we're helpers. And so the biggest version of that is you help for the sake of helping because you get joy out of that. The smaller version of that is you help because then it makes people like you and you feel validated and then you do it again. And that's how you sort of feel secure and safe in the world. And so when you think about an entrepreneur who keeps doing these shoulds, they keep telling themselves a story about why they have to keep doing a certain thing. You peel that back a little bit and you realize, oh, there maybe is a core pattern underneath that this is the only way they know how to be in the world and not feel like they're falling apart, disintegrating inside as a human being. And so there's an opportunity there to say, hey, like what are you running away from or running towards in trying to keep pushing yourself in this way. And let's try to unpack that and understand what's going on. And sometimes you know, then that working on that deeper level can then help somebody start to realize, oh, well, I like these parts of the job and this part of the business, but I really hate this other stuff. And I just haven't admitted it to myself. And it's a privately held company. I should actually, tweak this and do this particular thing that I really love that gives me energy in life now. So that's, sorry, this is a bit of a coaching soapbox rant and reflection, but that's how I think sometimes these external things have these underlying stories that are sometimes hard to see, hard to get into.
Well, I mean, you often talk about it, the right seats on, what is it? Right seats on the right bus, or right seats in the bus?
Right people, right seats.
Right. No bus? There's no bus in this at all?
The right people, right seats is an EOS thing, or I think maybe even Vern Harnish. The right seats on the bus, I think, is a Jim Collins thing. And they all get
All
pulled
right.
together at some point.
Regardless, it has to do with roles and having people doing the things, A, that they're good at, and B, that are important to the company. And so you've helped us, and I even used anecdotally the example of helping my partner and me clearly define our roles. Internally, recently, like almost literally today, I was having this conversation with my team where we're talking about product management and product marketing and product vision and product development. Like these are all and marketing, and these are all different roles. There might be the same people taking on one or two of these roles, but the question is, where does one role begin? Where does it end? And where does another one pick up? And so what you've taught me is how to think about responsibilities, not by necessarily a person, but by the definition of a role, and then figuring out who's the best person to get those things done.
Yeah.
And but clearly defining roles is really important for anyone's success in an organization. And without that, it's yet another variable that's going to lead to feeling stuck.
Oh, and
Because you're not getting things done because there's stuff that somebody's not paying attention to because it's not really in their scope of work, or they're not very good at it. And all this stuff just leads to getting stuck.
I'll tell you one place where this happens, just to bring it to life, is in sales. So often as a company's younger, depending on the market, sales can actually be more like customer service or order taking. So somehow a company generates leads, somebody's there picking up the phone, helping to help those leads get connected to the service. As a company grows, typically, almost inevitably, it gets to the point where whatever methods it was using to drive in leads and close those leads stops working for it to grow past a certain point. And many companies stay there, and that's fine, right? That may be where they want to stay. But other companies that want to grow, they basically have to figure out how to get more out of the leads that they get and get more leads, right? So in the sales function, you will often have, and I've seen this, where you have a sales leader who is a leader supposedly in sales, but doesn't actually perform what we might consider a sales function, which is, tracking who's coming in, having some sense of segmentation, having some proactive outreach, understanding how to handle objections, understanding how to increase a conversion rate. All these things that are part of the function of sales in a more mature company, the person who's leading sales might not even know, right? Because they just have not gotten there. So part of defining roles is both understanding who does what when it needs to be done, but as a company evolves, understanding how the role itself needs to evolve, and then continuing to ask that question of, does the person that we have in this current role get the job done for where the role needs to be? If so, great. If not, then what do we do about that?
Have you seen, we've talked a lot about vision. That's an area of growth for me, I think, over the past few years. It's funny at this stage in my career, I thought I'd pretty much be done learning things. I'd just be executing better. Like, oh my God, I'm like a rock star. Like, I'd be like one of the classic rockers out there, just going out and performing my shit, like
I could see it,
killing
Dave.
it,
I could see
just
it.
killing. I went to the Who's final tour in 1988. And I just learned it's now what, 2026, and I just learned that they did another final tour this year. I'm not kidding, Jay. I mean, that's 48 years ago. Am I
Yeah.
doing math right? 48 years ago, they announced their final tour.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so that's kind of how I visualize things at 55 as being like the Who and just rocking it all the time, like kicking ass, just being a kick-ass entrepreneur. But what I've discovered is that I'm actually still bad at things and I'm still uh, craving to learn how to do them better.
Yeah.
And being a better visionary was one of those things most recently. And I feel like I'm getting better at it. Learning to own the product vision is a part of that process. And that's something I've been working on with your help in my company. What relationship do you think having a clear vision has to do with being stuck or not stuck? Do you think that there a relationship
Of
there?
course. Yeah.
I mean, I
Hugely.
would think there is, but I can't quite. I'm having a hard time
Yeah.
connecting the
Well,
dots.
so again, stuck is kind of a big term, but and I'll use this simple sort of external internal definition, or this external internal framework to speak to that. So on the external side, I'll give you an example. A company a company's growth is very often influenced by the demand in the marketplace. This is why
Mhm,
venture capital companies, private equity companies, they go through these cycles of focusing on these different markets because they look ahead and they see, okay, there's going to be a huge market swell here. If you get a right company in the right place in the right market, sometimes you don't have to be that good to build
mhm,
a very successful business,
mhm.
or you don't have to be as buttoned up. But those,
I consider that finding a wave to
yeah,
ride,
find
and
exactly,
and
exactly.
that I've tried to do that with the two main businesses I've had is find this wave and get on
Yes,
it, and because to your point, you're riding a wave. Like you don't
it's
need to
great.
do everything
It's
really, really
phenomenal.
well.
And it you feel amazing. You're like, whoa, we're growing. Like this, the company keep being successful. And of course, you have a part in that, right? You can easily screw that up. But sometimes, yeah, the wind is at your back. And so those winds change. So sometimes you'll get a shift in a market, or often a company will grow to a certain size where they no longer can sort of get the growth that they want or need
Hmm.
to sustain themselves with whatever wins were there. And so typically when you get to that point, you see companies start to flatten out in terms of their growth and their vibrancy because and that's often where founders will feel stuck because they've hit kind of a wall. The market's not the same as it used to be. Maybe there's an economic shift. Maybe they sort of saturated their area of the market. Um, and so
Or Jay, perhaps as you get bigger, it gets harder to grow.
it's
Like
harder to grow.
it's easier to grow a $500,000 company
Yep.
than it is to grow a 10 or 50 or
Yep.
$100 million
Exactly.
company. So like the growth rate
A lot of
at,
different reasons. Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
$500,000, you could
Yeah.
easily do 100, 200, 300% growth.
Yep.
When you're $5, $10 million,
Yeah.
it's harder to do five,
Exactly. Exactly.
50%, 100%,
So
200% growth.
when we talk about vision and being stuck, very often what gets a company in that state unstuck is somebody, sometimes the founder, not always, can look out ahead and say, "Hey, what if we did this?" Or what's even more fun is, hey, what if we stopped doing this? And all of a sudden, stopping this thing unlocks something else for them. Or they realize, wait, all of our resources can get applied to this other problem that's exactly adjacent to us that we need to move into, right? So that's where great vision can get a company unstuck, but it has to be accompanied with great execution. You can't, as you know, you and I both know, we've tried this before. You build one business and you think, oh man, I know how to build a business. And then you try to launch some other business or other product on the side, and you're like, well, I built it. They're gonna, it's gonna be great. And then it's totally crickets, and you're like, what just happened?
You're not talking about my
So
business.
you need the execution, the vision, but that's the external side. The internal side is there's a certain kind of energy that the leader brings into a company. And um, if the leader is stuck in some way and doesn't have vision about what's ahead, then that energy will cascade into the company. Everybody will feel that. And so we've all been to a business that is actually, I can use a restaurant as an example. There are plenty of restaurants that are in the area that have been around for a long time. And you walk in and they kind of feel like, just feel kind of flat, right? The service is fine, the food is fine. There are other businesses. We went to one last night in our neighborhood, this bar that's been here since I moved here, so at least 20 years. And it is just like you walk in there and it's just like it's like they just started last week. And so somebody in there has a vision about what that place is supposed to be and feel like, and they're able to cascade that energy. I've also worked with founders who, like I mentioned earlier, it's like they're on the tail end of their career. They don't want to grow. They don't want to change. They just want to kind of wind it down. And so that might be okay for the founder, but a lot of other people in the company might feel like, oh, we're feeling a little stuck here. This is not really changing, not really growing. We're not keeping up with the times. Um, so that's another way of not having vision internally for the person who's supposed to have the vision, often the founder or the CEO, that can lead to a company feeling stuck as well.
Jay, you'll like this, and you can use it too. You can even take credit for it. We did our quarterly planning, and you've guided us well. You're not helping us right now with our quarterly planning. You do our annual planning and our one-on-one coaching, but we're doing our quarterly planning on our own, thanks to your guidance. And as we were kicking off the 2-day session, I didn't lead the session. Ashley on our team led the session. She was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I did open up and, just try to say a few inspiring words because I was excited about the day. It's one of my favorite things to do. But as a little icebreaker to get us started, the icebreaker, it was so much fun. It was, what is the worst idea you can think of for us to embrace as an objective for next quarter? What is the absolute worst thing we could do in our company as an objective for next quarter? And it was so fun because it basically took us down that path of what we shouldn't do, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. That's really fun. Yeah. I'll say real quick, just in case the listeners are curious, I think you all have been like model participants in, we use the growth method. And over the last several years, I've led your quarterly sessions
Which, by the way, growth method is like a version of scaling up or EOS.
Yeah,
It's like a
business operations.
concoction of those things. Yeah.
And so we've done that. We started with EOS years ago and shifted to this as I shifted, from EOS to Cruise and Co. And so we started with this, and you all showed up and you did the work, you participated, and we did what, probably 3 or 4 years of sessions together, right?
Well, we were really cheap in the beginning, and we've known you for a while. In the beginning, we're like, Jay, like, we don't want to spend the money. So we want to take a crack at this on our own. We've done this kind of thing. I think we can do it. And we did it for, was it a year? I think
2
we did.
years, I think. Yeah.
What's that?
I think 2 years.
2 years. So we did it for
Yeah.
2 years. And I remember calling you from Atlanta one day and be like, like literally in a break
Remember that
at
call?
one of our strategic planning sessions. And Cameron, my partner, and I, we were just so frustrated. And I called you up and was like, Jay, we really need your guidance. Like you need to be here for the next one.
Well, and
So we, from that point in, we brought you in. Yeah.
And then what's really cool, and I like to share this because I think that this is part of the joy of coaching is to see people kind of integrate the tools and techniques that we use and then take them and make them their own. So I shepherded you all for, I don't know, for 3 or 4 years, right? On the annual and quarterly planning sessions. And this year, you made the call, which was wise, and a couple of other clients of mine have done this too, which is, hey, we'll do, 1 or 2 sessions. We'll do the annual session with you. Another client of mine has me come twice a year, and then they do the in-between sessions. But it's actually a phenomenal thing that you all have done to integrate those learnings, and then also to have somebody on your team who's really got that sort of systematic approach to be able to facilitate. So just a little bit of context there on what we did and why it was, I think, a really powerful thing for you all. And I think I would venture to guess that that meeting was different in great ways and had a different vibe and had a different sort of feel, and you got something valuable and different out of that than you would have out of having me there.
I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there were times where it would have been. I think we were all looking at each other, saying, "Man, I wish Jay could answer this question for us." Like, we'd love to like poke Jay right now and find out. What do they call it? Phone a friend. I wanted to phone a
Oh,
Jay.
well, you know what you need is JI.
That's great. I do need Jay. But but also I'll say that we did not make that decision to save money. Maybe we did. I don't know. The decision, I think we made that decision because we sincerely believe we had been guided enough to do it on our own. But
Exactly.
but what I really wanted was to utilize you, going back to roles and responsibilities. I wanted to utilize you with my team individually because I thought you'd have a greater impact on our company working with my team one-on-one like you and I do together. Hey, let's bring this to a close. Two questions. One is I'd love for you to, is there some sort of, if somebody's feeling stuck, which is for a lot of people, I think it's this feeling, right? It's just a feeling and it's hard to pinpoint. Is there some sort of framework or series of questions? And I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this, but is there like a series of questions or a framework or a way for somebody to take inventory to try to figure out what can I do to get out of this funk?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the first question. The other question though is, did I miss something, Jay? Is there something else that we should have talked about in this hour?
Oh, there's so many things we could just
But if there's nothing off the top of your head, I'm cool. Like, that's good. I just want to make sure I wasn't leaving out something really big that you wanted to talk about.
No, this is just a wonderful meander through stuckness and getting unstuck.
Yeah. Okay. So take me through. If you have some suggestions on how to,
I do.
how to take inventory on that feeling of stuckness.
I do. So one of the things that happens to us, especially when we're feeling these negative feelings, is that we try to make sense of them in our head. And our brains are just only capable of managing, a couple of active pieces at a time. So what happens is things start to swirl. And then in that swirl, it's like a shadow on a wall, right? A kid sees a shadow, they're getting up to go to the bathroom. They say, oh no, there's this huge monster or whatever. It turns out it's this tiny little thing. It was just in front of the light. That's what happens in our heads when we're stuck and things just start to turn and turn and turn. Shadow gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden it's like this monolithic thing that we can't do anything about. And so my go-to on this is, I call it dump and sort. So the first thing is just to get everything out. Everything, like your whole, think about your whole life, like where are you stuck, and just get it all out.
Are you talking about journaling? Like writing it down?
Yeah, writing it down. Not quite journaling, just writing it down. Although you could call that journaling. The cool thing these days is you can use Claude or ChatGPT and just speak to it. Just go for an hour-long walk and tell it all of the things that feel stuck to you.
If you were to prompt ChatGPT or Claude right now with that kind of thing, like roughly, and I'm not asking you to perfect something, but like roughly, what would you say?
I wouldn't even do that. I would start by saying, hey, I'm just going to try to get a bunch of things out. I'm feeling stuck. I'm going to try to explain everything that's going on. And what I'd like for you to do is break it down into bullet points and sort of capture and sort of synthesize the stuckness.
Help
Not
me organize my
help me
thoughts.
organize it. Yep.
Yep.
So the first
Okay.
step is just getting the stuff out and organizing it. You can do that on your own. You can do that with an LLM. And then from there, you've
That's awesome. Right there. That alone, especially given my love affair with AI right now, like that alone is a really cool idea.
it's so powerful because sometimes all you need to do is just get everything out. And then once
Yeah.
you see it, sometimes the pattern makes itself apparent. However, usually if you're stuck, you don't know why you're stuck, right?
Hmm.
Otherwise, you probably would have solved it. So at that point, that's where you look at this and say, all right, I call this a tangled problem. And in a tangled problem, you can imagine a knot like a ball of, yarn or string or something that's completely tangled up. You can't find the beginning, you can't find the end. You have no idea where to start. What do? Well, you try to look around for the place that looks most productive to start, which might be just a loose, area, and you pull at it and you wiggle at it and you try to get it loose. And so once you get everything down, you want to do your best to figure out, well, what's the place that I can at least start working on? And then just focus on that, make a plan, and try to get some momentum. This is all shorthand, right? If I were doing this with somebody, we would go through it a little bit more in more depth. The other thing you can do is, whether or not you used AI to get that out, then feed it back in and say, all right, I'm feeling stuck. Like, where would you start, right? Just to get a second opinion. I mean, these days you can get a CFO opinion, you can get a CMO opinion, you can get a, psychiatrist opinion all through Claude or ChatGPT. You just ask it, hey, where I'm stuck, what pattern do you see? Which is a huge value add in terms of, in the past, you'd have to go seek out all these experts individually and get their opinion. And once you understand where to start working, the key thing is to try to start telling the story of getting unstuck. As a story, I say story because it's very simple. So you dump everything out, you sort it out, it's tangled, you pick one or two areas, say, okay, I'm going to go after these. And you start to tell yourself the story. Okay, I think I'm stuck because of this. I don't have this. This is not working. So what I'm going to do is start to work on this. I'm going to find somebody to help me. I'm going to do this. And in about 2 months, I think I'm going to be able to get out of this stuckness or at least feel some movement. And that story, a very simple story, that becomes your life raft. Because then all you have to do is just keep telling yourself that story and keep acting, right? The two things go together. If you keep acting, you don't tell yourself the story, eventually you're going to lose momentum because after a week or two, you're going to forget why you were doing it and get tired of it and it's going to stink. But you got to keep telling yourself the story and then you also have to keep acting. And those two things together will create movement. And typically, movement is what the sort of precursor to getting unstuck in some way, shape, or form.
What you just described to me is a vision, right? You create a vision for a
That's,
world where you're unstuck.
that's it. Yeah.
Like imagine what would it be like if you weren't stuck?
Yeah.
What would be happening? There'd be maybe less stress. Maybe you wouldn't be working so many hours. Maybe you'd have more freedom in your day. Maybe deals would be rolling in over the transom.
Yeah.
Um, and we talked about a lot of tactics today about, creating an A team or evaluating the B team. We talked about the feeling as though you're irreplaceable, delegation. What else did we talk about? We talked about letting go of control. Um, uh, we talked about vision is something I brought up. Um, there were, I'm sure there were other things in there. Roles and responsibilities was a big one we talked about. So there's a lot of tactical things, but I love your suggestion. Dump it all out, create the ideal vision, and then you can start to use the tactical things to figure out how you get to your vision.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the kind of wicked part of this is that when you're really stuck, it's hard. It's just hard to see that and do that. So sometimes you have to um, bring somebody else in, a friend, a partner,
Hmm.
a coach. Or the flip side is sometimes you have to remove yourself from the situation, take a week off, go somewhere, just get a hotel for 3 nights somewhere else and just like,
Vision quest in the desert, man.
there
Get
you
some
go. Yeah.
mushrooms.
Yeah, you could do that too. Yes. That's a
So,
that's a way of getting unstuck.
so you actually not mushrooms. This is not where I'm going with this, but you actually um helped. One of the coolest tools you gave me was a window of time to think.
Yeah.
In fact, and a lot of people are like, I just don't have time. I'm so busy. I got so much stuff going. But what I've done now, and so I have to hold myself accountable to this, and I'm not very good at doing it every week, but I've carved out a 2 hour window in my calendar every week called thinking. And what a great place to go if you're feeling stuck. This is the kind of exercise I would do in that thinking window. And then that thinking window, talking about this, I mean, that would give me 5 other
Yeah.
things to work on. And it's not quite journaling. I
Yeah.
don't journal, but I do take notes and talk to myself. I guess that's journaling, isn't it? But I do write things down. I type them. I don't use a pencil like a lot of people suggest. I open a note on my computer. I really love using AI as a back and forth.
Yeah.
But
Well, do you also remember you did a version of this with your partner, right? You guys felt stuck. You felt like, hey, we're not exactly sure where we're going. And I think you called it a vision quest. I don't know what you did, but you went and
oh
you
yeah. Yeah,
timed
yeah, yeah. I
two of
didn't know
you
what
to
you were
go
talking
out
about. So
and
this
actually just do that thinking together, which
so
then got you
yeah.
unstuck. Yeah.
So this was very specifically, we were struggling to figure out. I'll be very specific about this actually. We're struggling to figure out how we take the platform, the software that we have, and we didn't feel like we were on this AI wave. And we're thinking like, we're going to miss this wave if we don't do something. What do we need to do to get on the AI wave? And we were stuck. Like we're bouncing ideas off each other, and too much time went by and we're like, we don't. So we went on this vision quest, to like what we call the vision quest. And we got together in person. He lives in Atlanta. I live here in Boston, and we got together in person. And we spent a few days together, and we left there feeling rejuvenated, excited, and we had sparked some really cool ideas, of which we've implemented now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, Jay Bacrania,
Thank you, Dave.
I know you're not doing this to get, in fact, I know you don't have time for new business, but having said that, if people want to connect with you, and you said you would give them your LinkedIn
Yeah.
profile, how can they find you on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So my name will be hopefully in the show notes, Jay Bacrania, and you can I think I'm the only one.
I always call you Jay Bacrania. I've known you for 15 years, and I
Both
called you
work.
Jay. And I'm just learning now it's Jay Bacrania.
It's fine. They both work. I respond to both.
That's
Uh,
Bacrania.
yep. You can find me on LinkedIn and just send me a message there.
Jay, thanks, man. I'm
Thank you,
looking
Dave.
forward to the next one. We'll do this again in let's say a month or a month and a half.
Sounds great.
All right.
Okay. See ya.